20, I think, or 21, when the 10 words were given. Let's see right here. Okay, yeah, Exodus 20, where it says an altar of earth, speaking about an altar of earth. So before the brazen altar, we see where there was an altar, and it's the altar of earth in Exodus 20. And then as we go through the outline of the tabernacle, and this page here gives a really good overview right here. If ones can, I would recommend that you maybe just make a PDF of this so you can study it, elsewise, and even print it out. Right here, this is from Messianic Torah Truth Seeker. That's Messianic Torah Truth Seeker.org. And in going through the outline of the tabernacle, beginning from the Ark of the Covenant, because the Most High he begins from himself, working outwardly to reach us. He comes from himself to us, right? So he begins from the innermost of the inner, the Mekdesh, the Mikdash, the holy place, right? Now, it's interesting because when we study the Tabernacle of David, the Tabernacle of David, in a sense, cuts to the chase, in a sense, in the grace, where it's just for the presence of the ark, right? In the tent of David in Zion. That's getting into the Tabernacle of David. The basic foundation right here is based on the tabernacle, the revelation, the tabernacle of Moses. So I wanted to do a vid where, I kind of touch on the revelation of why is the brazen feet of Yeshua brazen. We say we use this area in Revelation, right, to fight against the Antichrist lies and propaganda concerning like blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus and all of this other kind of paganistic and heathenistic kind of stuff for both Jew and Gentile, for black and white, and all need to know the truth, though some persist in the lie. But it's at this point in Revelation chapter 1, verse 15, where it says, and his feet like to fine brass, as if they burnt in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters. Now, already in the verse before, it says his head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire. Now, some say that this is all just basically symbolic language, right? And one thing they don't recognize about the revelation of the Almighty, there's a symbolic sense of it, but there's an actual sense. And in some of his prophetic words, both are revealed. You know what I mean? Both is a reality. We might say that the scriptures, it's a mythology or so forth and so on. But one thing you find about the so-called Ethiopic Hebrew, or the royal order of the Ethiopian Hebrews in a true Hebraic way, you know what I mean, spirit and in truth, there is both a literal type, but there's firstly a figurative type, right? So we are seeing a kind of a figurative type, or what they call it, metaphor. Some people say it's a metaphor. So they'll say that, well, he's not really black, and what they call black, or Ethiopic as opposed to a European individual, No, he's not really an Ethiopic individual. It's just a parable. And they'll say, well, it's a parable of the altar in the tabernacle. Now, they are correct with the symbolic interpretation of the logic of the logos of the word, but they are denying the flesh that the Moshiach came in that Ethiopian Hebrew. Are you not as the children of Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel? Amos 9 and 7. They're denying that because they have been deceived. with this whole white supremacy, racism, and all this kind of other stuff, say don't play any kind of divide and conquer, but if we look at the reality of this, does it mean that we have to come to his feet? Think about it for a moment, because if the feet represent, let's bring this up right here. The feet represents, let's show this right here. The feet represents the brazen altar, according to the symbolic logic. So both are true. Both his feet, was melanated, as an Afro-Asiatic individual. And according to the tabernacle type that the body of Yeshua symbolizes, fulfilling that metaphor, fulfilling that parable, becoming the true type, in other words, of the antitype. So the first place in the tabernacle that we come to, in the sense of the old and the pattern, is to the brazen altar, right? Is to the brazen altar. You know what I mean? And here in the Schofield, they didn't go into much detail, but the little bit of detail here on page 104, it states that the brazen altar is a type of the cross upon which Christ, our whole burnt offering. So Yeshua represents our whole burnt offering. He offered himself without spot. Tamim in the Hebrew. He was tamim, without spot, inkenulelabet, right? To Ha-Elohim, right? Avinu Sheba Shemayim, his father, our father. Now, we have this in Hebrews chapter 9, verse 14. If we look into Hebrews chapter 9, which is the gospel to the Hebrews, chapter 9, verse 14, here's what we find written. It says, how much more shall the blood of Christ, the life of Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to Elohim, purge your conscience. It's his blood, it's his liberty that gets us out of the guilty that purges the guilty conscience. Guiltiness rests on their it's the blood of Yeshua that